Hi, Sally Ann. I thought it was easiest to record my thoughts a little bit. I'm absolutely happy to have a natter on the phone if it helps. I just thought it might be good to give you my thoughts, and then you can sort of run them round in your head before you sort of come back to me. I totally empathise, having been there. And yeah, it's a really difficult one. We were very lucky, we felt, to have a little ex-riding school saved him from the French riding school, and then it sort of became a bit of a nightmare because he was great while I led her when she was tiny, and then when she got older it was more difficult. But actually in the end what worked was her learning to ride better on other ponies, and then come back and apply stuff to Cacahuète, Peanut, our little pony. So some of the way I look at it might well be coloured by my own very personal experience in this. I was probably a tiny bit further on than where you are in your thinking at the moment. I had already definitely gone over to the positive reinforcement side. I was training my own horses with positive reinforcement. But I had been in and out of that cycle for a while. So again, I empathise, because it feels like when you find it, yes, this is the thing, and then you hit something that isn't too easy to get through, and you think, is this the right thing? So I do understand totally. So what I'm going to do is whip through a few of the things on your form, which it's brilliant when people put so much information in, because it really does help me. And the only reason I'm not going straight in and saying, right, come on, work on this and send me some video and we'll go through it, I want you to be absolutely certain that you want to go ahead with this, because I don't think, and I'll explain my reasoning as I go, I don't think it's a particularly easy thing to do. So saddle is fine. He's been refitted, and you've had a little tinker with that from what I can gather elsewhere that you've mentioned. The bridle side pull, you're having a few problems, and again, I think from the little video clips riding, I can probably give you some ideas about that and what works and what doesn't work. He didn't like a Dr. Cook. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think often it's the case. I have found very few horses that actually like that style of, when you teach a really clean, clear rein cue, that actually like the head feel. But, obviously some people seem to like them a lot. You mentioned that he wears grass reins in a sort of Chambon style, because, yeah, it's just the thing, isn't it? I mean, I lost count of times that the times that Cacahuète would put his head down and they would just shoot off over the top. In the end, we took nearly all our tack off. She had a bitless bridle, which actually was a little crossover, but we had it on as a side cue. And she just took her saddle off and rode him bareback. It just seemed the easiest thing. She was coming off him so often, and then the saddle didn't seem to stop it. And from that position, she developed a much better balance and position anyway. But yeah, it's awful when that happens. And it's okay, sort of to say, don't use correction tools. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a child riding a pony. Again, I'll have a little word about the ethics of how you feel about stuff as we go along. So he's no medication, and he was vetted when you bought him. Nothing untoward's found. I do notice he's quite stiff behind. That's not that unusual in the little pones. Some of the Welshes can be quite stiff behind, but at his age, that's also a likelihood. And possibly because he's not ever been worked in a way that he's used his back. Those hind legs have kind of seized up a little bit. Okay, so yeah, you'd already gone bitless and nothing else medical noted. Right, let me move on. Okay, so yeah, you've had him for 8 years, which is fantastic. And so you know so much about him, and he's very chilled with you. From what you say, it sounds as if he's almost more bonded with you because you've done the work with him. But yeah, we found that was a difficult one. And sometimes I just had to leave her get on with it and walk away because I think I made it worse sometimes. But it really does depend on your setup. So we had a fully enclosed sand school with nice bouncy elastic fence around it. So there was, obviously there's always a risk when they're riding, but the risks I felt were letting her just play on her own were less so than just being out in the field, which is always a tricky one. So yeah, you haven't tackled everything. I don't blame you. Clipping and hosepipe, does he really need to have to do it? Yeah. I suppose the one thing I would say that when you sort out those little things, the actual training that you have to do for it can be really helpful in a general sense. So the fact that you're starting to lessen his fear about things in his general environment can be helpful to the relationship, obviously. But you know, I absolutely don't blame you for not going down that avenue at the moment. Yeah, you had a problem loading, and I mentioned, yeah, that you just resort to a light amount of negative reinforcement. I won't lie, I have a lot of students who will still use negative reinforcement. And the reason for that, Sally Ann, is that they're just not good enough at applying positive reinforcement. And that's not saying that you're not good enough at applying it. You've already highlighted what your problem is, and that is that when you don't know what else to do, we go back to what we know. And I don't blame you, and it's always on a continuum, isn't it? It's not, oh, I'll be really good and just use positive reinforcement all the time, or I'll be a you know, Monty Roberts style and tell him what to do all the time. That there's a continuum between the two whereby you feel comfortable using one or the other, and degrees of one or the other. So I don't judge you one bit for that. And you know, carefully applied negative reinforcement, and by that I mean, if you've got to load a pony, you've got to load a pony. If he's got to go to the vet, if he's got to come home from the beach and he's not wanting to, there's a point at which, you know, I think you said 7 hours, I've been there, you know, it's soul destroying. So I suppose what we have to think about is that all these things need training ahead of time. And I'm very aware that you only have a year before Rowan's likely to want to move on to something a little bigger. As I can see, she's growing. Same thing happened with Lydia, and we actually lost her pony to colic in the end. So she just hopped onto my horse in the end and used him. But yeah, I can see where it's difficult for you. So yeah, and you say it was punishment. I don't think it was punishment. It's so hard to choose, isn't it? You wanted him to do something, so you put some pressure on, he did it, and you took the pressure off. So in theory it's more negative reinforcement, but you were using unaversive because if it hadn't worked, he wouldn't have moved on and got onto the transport. So there's a very, you know, the idea of the quadrants is very black and white when you see it written on paper, but in reality there's a lot of fog between the quadrants, and there's a lot of crossover, and you can look at one thing and say, well, is it a bit of that? So is it a bit of positive punishment because I wanted him to go on, I wanted him to stop doing what he was doing, which was planting. I used something aversive and he went on. Does that mean I will see less of the behaviour? Well, it does, because he's gone on since, by the sounds of things. So yes, there is that crossover between, is it negative reinforcement or is it positive punishment? So you're confident, you're as cautious because you're happy with some aspects of your use of positive reinforcement. And you use it for new training, which is what a lot of people do. And I always say, often when people start out, they are trainers who use a clicker. And when you finally kind of cross over, if you go into it in absolute you become a clicker trainer. I use the word clicker, I avoided it for years. It just means a positive reinforcement trainer, but most people know what I mean when I say a clicker trainer. A lot of my students are using positive reinforcement, they're not necessarily using a clicker, but if I refer to it as clicker training, I'm really talking positive reinforcement. Okay. So yeah, you're aware that use of negative reinforcement is so ingrained with you at times that you don't realise you're using it. And in the case of riding, yeah, and I have a number of places where I go now where people are saying, do I untrain everything I've done? Do I go back and say, here's a rein, it means nothing, here's a rein, it means nothing? Or do I accept the fact that those things are already trained using negative reinforcement? And do I make sure that going forwards, I make them a positive reinforced cue? Absolute honest truth on it, crossover horses are hard, full stop. Whether you go right back to the beginning and say, hey, this is how it's going to be forever now, I'm never going to use any negative reinforcement, or whether you do a little tinkering around the edges and go back in as far as you feel comfortable with, or whether you just keep all those cues that you have in place and add a clicker to them, it doesn't matter. Honestly, it's a lot harder than it is with a brand new horse that's never done any true negative reinforcement. So you're always trying to make it balance right for you and get as much out of it for the pony or the horse as you possibly can. So yeah, Rowan and Roo have been going to a natural horsemanship person to do their agility, which is a great shame because you absolutely don't have to. But obviously this is somebody that is local to you, and you have to decide what you want to do. Yeah, and targets are not allowed in those sessions. Well, I'll fess up right at the beginning, I'm not a great target person. I see a lot of bad target use. Very, very briefly, I see a lot of bad target use because people don't teach the pony or horse when not to touch it. So you've got somebody wandering around with a target and the pony trying to get to it, and they get really frustrated and they're just desperate to get to that target. I've been to places where literally they've had a reverse round pen with the person on the inside with the target, and the horse has been literally breaking down the fence to get to, or the poles to get to that target if it's not presented. So if you've taught the targets really well at the beginning, which means if I present a target and don't cue you to touch it, it's not an issue, and you can stand there and not feel frustrated by it, then great. If targets have been the thing that you've constantly lured the pony forwards with, without any clear way of stopping that and letting them relax and feel it's okay, then I've got more of an issue with targets. But I think it's difficult from what you've said anyway, because you don't really want Rowan to be offering food, which I absolutely understand. It's so difficult. So yeah, you're very confident around horses, but you lose confidence in your ability to structure your own theoretical principles. Hey, welcome to the club. But I think just in identifying that, you've jumped the first hurdle, so that's fantastic. But yeah, it's very difficult. I won't kid you that it's a really easy path. There are a lot of behaviourists and trainers out there saying, yes, it's easy. No, I won't work with you if you want to use any negative reinforcement. We're only going to do this with positive reinforcement. I'm very pragmatic about these things, and yes, that's the world I'd love to live in, but it's not a world I'm going to be living in anytime soon. So I'm there to try and help bring people to the table and let them see the benefits and support them through the problems that you're having. So yeah, you won't get judgment from me, but I do understand how hard that is. Yeah, I think everything was absolutely fine in terms of, yeah, so he doesn't see scratching as a reinforcer. Just one thing that I would ask on that is how hard you scratch. Do you ever scratch him that you can see his muzzle start to screw up in delight? If you scratch him and then move away, will he move to you to get the scratch? So, just worth finding out, because one thing I do find is that people don't scratch anywhere near hard enough. It should make your nails really hot, ends of your finger really hot from scratching. Because if you think of how a pony and horse might scratch each other at the wither. It's done with their teeth, and it's really hard. So sometimes I'll just get maybe a hoof pick between my thumb, just a flat one, not a pointy one, between my thumb and forefinger, and so it's only just poking out, but I'll let that do the scratching. So yeah, it's worth having a little look at. So he's freaks out in the stable occasionally if he thinks you're going to do something he finds unnerving. So yeah, he's got a lot of baggage behind him, which, bless him, I can understand. Yeah, he's lovely. I've seen the leading. That's nice. Again, there's lots of stuff I could help with there if that's the way you decide to go forwards. Yeah, I think that's all cool. Dentist, obviously you found this tooth in the roof of his mouth, which will have made his life with a bit in the riding school pretty horrid. And yeah, obviously it's a better thing that he doesn't have a bit in. So and then you get into the real nitty gritty and talking about you know, the current and past training. And I know you're trying to focus on Rowan and Roo and yourself rather than just you, but you know, I have a massive sort of overwhelming feeling that you're really thinking about yourself first, and I think you should. I absolutely think that's really important. I think then you can say, okay, now I know how I'm going to ask Roo to go forwards for Rowan, or ask Rowan how she wants Roo to go forwards for her. Yeah, rough and ready dealers, and then to intelligent horsemanship, Richard Maxwell, classical riding, equitation science, and now to clicker and lemur and behaviour. Justine's fantastic. I love connection training too. So you have a lot of experience. I think you're just looking for a way forward from what I can gather. Rowan is 10 and Roo is 18. So yeah, they've been together for some time. He's been very dependable as a lead rein pony, which makes life so easy. You know, he obviously gets a lot of comfort from being on the lead. He doesn't have to think for himself, and that's what you often find with riding school ponies. They've never really been given a chance to think for themselves. So when they're asked to think for themselves with a youngster on top who can't really guide them the way that you or I would, that they take over. Who can blame them? Why would I listen to her? What does she know? So she's tried him off lead rein, and he's in a confined area. He's not so bad. And then he's had a wobble. You're back in your usual setup, which is a flat field, which is good. No arena, but you rope off an area in the field, that's fine. You can absolutely work in that sort of area. So Rowan's been wanting to do more off the lead. I get that absolutely as well. It became apparent Roo wasn't keen, and in the side pull he basically plays ball a bit and doesn't turn and doesn't stop. Okay, I've had a little look, and I'm going to just do a quick voiceover, a little bit of the video if I can find the right one. The last one with the for some reason it just won't play for me. It's like a photograph. It runs the video, but it just stays on the first slide. So I'm not sure whether that's I tried it on my phone as well, and I couldn't get that one to play. But the one that I can play, I'll give you an idea. So I think, first of all, you have to have a little thought about that, because, yeah, he will play ball. But what's in it for him? You know, and I can see a little bit of lack of clarity in her cues, which she's 10, you know, I wouldn't expect there not to be. So yeah, I think you could work lots on giving him better cues and making life a lot easier for him to understand. But I'm always going to say he's 18 and she's only 10. So, you know, there's always that difficulty in how much work you can put in and how much effort. It's not going to be a quick fix. So yeah, he's gone back to being lead rein pony because that feels more comfortable. So you've changed your plan, focused on agility. I like the agility, and he's been really super the last 7 months or so. And you've used the click treat a little if he needed any help, i.e. with the curtain obstacle, and that's worked nicely. But he does get pop-eyed and a bit too keen, So you've had to judge it carefully. Okay, and I've been cautious about Rowan using this as I'm not sure how she'll cope and I didn't want to pollute their relationship. I absolutely get that. I think it's very, very hard to ask a 10-year-old to get their timing. And I've done a lot of this year. I've been working at a riding school trying to help them swap over for their pony club for the ponies to be positive reinforcement trained. It's hard. I had a group only at the end of November, and admittedly they're not having one-to-one lessons, but it's very hard to keep a 10-year-old's focus when a lot of it is about the mechanics. A lot of it, you know, even for an adult, most people, I take their clickers off them until they've stood in the mirror for an hour and worked out that their hand is going to the bag in between times, which they didn't realise, and all the little things that happen. So yeah, I think that's you're going to have a think about that. Do you want Rowan to use Roo as her stepping stone to learning a better way around horses, because she's going to be on horses at some point in the not too distant future? Or do you want her to carry on using negative reinforcement and when she's older do what you've done, which is cross over? And that was the dilemma that I had myself. Do I let my child think it's okay to use negative reinforcement, or do I not? So I've slipped that there in the middle. If you haven't fallen asleep after, I think it's about 20 minutes, if you haven't fallen asleep by this point, this is the ding ding, wake up Sally Ann, because I think this is the moment you've got to really think this one out. Because I'm going to be absolutely honest, in a year, if I had him for a year and I worked with him 3 or 4 times a week, do I think I might be able to get him pretty good? Yeah. Do I think with some help you could? Yeah. Do I think I could get Rowan to that point in a year? I don't know, because I don't know Rowan. So I'm just knowing that it's quite a hard thing to do. And I understand, because you go on then to say that what you've done is you've used the positive reinforcement and then Rowan's got back on and been kind and gentle. But what you can see from the videos is it's not absolutely clear to him. There's times when she's holding with her hands and saying go with her legs, and he's doing nothing. He doesn't sort of really respond. So, yeah, I can't answer that question for you. It's a real toughie. But do you want Rowan to grow up thinking I wanted, therefore I got? So I want to ride off lead rein and do trek? Or do you say, maybe I could do some ridden agility, some really careful things that he's already done? Maybe that would be your first place to start, rather than thinking about, you know, can we go out and do trek? Because trek's quite a big jump, I think, probably from where you are, and I think you're aware of that. So I'm guessing that even though you think you've probably got a year, what you're talking about is probably next summer, you know, when there will be competitions and stuff that she could do. So, yeah, again, that one's out there for debate, and I think you're going to have a little think about that. So when you bought him, he was ridden by competent kids at the riding school and would do jump lessons and was fine off the lead rein as long as they could ride. Yeah, and I guess that he was just one of those ponies that you often get. He's probably uncomfortable for a lot of his time, and so if they didn't make themselves more scary than what he had to do, then he would just dump them. So, and he knows that. He knows that that's a possibility. So that's always difficult, and I've had a lot of experience with ponies like that over time. So you can long line him and he thinks that's fine, but that's, yeah, akin to you being an experienced rider. The only thing I would say, and I'm not sure from how you're saying that, do you long line him with Rowan on? Do you... I'm trying to think. I have a suspicion that you mentioned somewhere you have lunged him with Rowan on. But yeah, the lack of Rowan's experience and Roo's learned habits are absolutely the problem. He He's insecure. You're right. And is he confident enough to be independent? No. So all the things, the calling I heard on some of the videos, you know, even though he's only in a little space tucked away from his buddies, he's struggling. So to take him to something like a trek competition, oh my goodness, I think that's going to blow his little brains. Yeah, again, I could be wrong. And if he's got company that he's used to, maybe that's something that you could build up to. But I'm just sensing there's going to be an awful lot of work to do here. Not impossible, but yeah, I think there's work to be done. So next factor, while I'm getting it all out there, which is great because I'm hoping this has been a bit cathartic for you to get your head around stuff. In theory, you do target training and go from one cone to the next, one target to the next, move the targets wider, etc. You can do that, and Rowan would like it, but A, you're not comfortable with him seeing her as a treat machine, as he does get too excited, even with low-value treats, but doesn't seem to like scratches enough for them to be a suitable reinforcer, which is often the case. And B, Rowan is getting too big for him, and you'd say she's got about a year. And wants to get out and do some stuff. So timescales are a little tight for a full-blown retraining using positive reinforcement. And I've kind of almost said, I think, already that, you know, that's a hard thing with a crossover, with an 18-year-old crossover that has a big history of issues with it, even more so. So you get yourself tangled up in all those "ah, yeah, but" type things. And yeah, I think this is the bit I like the most. My other little niggle in the back of my head is related to how fair it is when Roo has been so utterly lovely and brilliant in his lead rein agility role to expect him to take on these new challenges when he obviously isn't happy with it. Oh yeah, here's the bit about the lunging. I wasn't wrong. You tried lunging them. He took ages to accept you. Okay, so, you know, I think maybe what I said earlier about, you know, I don't know what ridden agility you can do. I know that Lotta, who lives near, in my area, who's another behaviour person, I know she does do ridden agility as well. So I'm assuming there are things that you can do ridden, and if not, we can make them up. But I wonder if going down that line in some way would be better. I mean, have a look into dressage, for instance, because they often have like a handy pony, which, you know, might just involve, you know, leading your pony while trying to get through a hula hoop, stepping up on buckets while leading one's pony, getting on your pony, getting off your pony, you know, so maybe we should think wider than, say, trek but within his comfort zone, because what I'm really worried about is that you're going to push Roo into the red straight away because you're going to try and do something completely different. Why don't we take what Roo's good at and add a little? So this is just off the top of my head. How about we had you doing the agility with them, and then phasing you out so that Rowan rode the agility obstacles, whatever they might be, and gradually do it like that. Yeah, I mean, I can see obviously she's doing bits of ridden agility already, but, you know, in a competitive sense, so that kind of lit her fire for competitive stuff, but kept him below threshold a little bit. So yeah, you try not to connect with him and encourage them to keep going, but I can see that Rowan's rein aids mean nothing, so we can teach that, we can help that. Here we go. She can ride him around the agility course when you've been training, and he's better with that, but was still duck, and have seen him a couple of times threatening to properly nap in the corner. So what I would suggest there is he's just over threshold too quickly. So whenever you do use positive reinforcement, you have to think about how it can apply to other training as well, whether it's negative reinforcement or positive, it doesn't matter. But that's not pushing them over threshold, keeping within what they can do. So if you push it a little bit, so you wouldn't do a whole agility course in hand, then pop her on and let her ride it. You do all the elements simply, And maybe you could have an area where he went to get fed as his reward when he finished, or maybe she could have the odd one on her to feed him when he got something brilliantly right. I don't know. They're all things that we could consider, but I think that you really have to absolutely be sure that that's the way forward that you want to go to. So yeah, I think obviously you're already thinking along the same lines as me in terms of doing the ridden agility. And yeah, it was interesting. I was quite surprised that he called when you could see his friends were right next door. So yeah, he's been a lovely lead rein pony for years and a fab agility pony recently. But you'd love to get her out there doing agility and trek training in 2020. Okay, so what happens if you keep going back to the natural horsemanship person with agility? Is that where you have to go to do the... is she doing live competitions, Sally Ann, or is it videoed competitions? Because I'm wondering if it would be obviously more sensible for her to be doing, I'm assuming, ones online. So really, does she have to go to this natural horsemanship person? And how is the agility marked? Is that why you can't use cones? I'm not a massive agility person. I haven't really come across much of it, apart from seeing people share videos online. So I'm not sure about the marking of it. But, maybe she could, other levels, maybe she could go up levels within it to tick some boxes in terms of competitive spirit, whilst still making it safe and calmer for Roo, and develop her horsemanship skills better, so that then when she's ready to go on to another pony, she's already there. She's got those skills in place. So yeah, you do understand learning theory, equitation science. Yeah, first introduced it to you. And you've covered it in training with Ben Hart and Justine, and you've got the NAC level 1 materials, which are fantastic as well. The only thing I would be careful of is if you're using Ben, and I love Ben, he's another person that works in the same area as me, and Ben is great, but he has a thing where he uses an intermediate bridge, which I find is really confusing for novice ponies and clicker trainers or positive reinforcement people. You don't mention whether you've done any clicker training at all. I'm assuming you haven't with Rowan using it, because of how you feel that makes him. But I would, if you want to go ahead with this, I think I'd like to see you doing a little bit with him, so that I can see the stress that comes and see your timing. So I think that would be useful. I'm going to pause, flip to the video, and then hopefully end very soon so you don't die of boredom. Okay, so here we are on your video. I'm going to see if I can make it bigger. Let's see. Oh, that's better. A little bit better anyway. So let's have a look at this. So lovely, she's ridden him through there. And there, so you can just see there, she knows that he's going to go off to one side. So the way she deals with it, I don't blame her, is to keep her hands still and tuck down on his withers. And then she uses her leg to kick him on. So whilst I understand why she needs to do that, it's going to be a really long slog for her using that sort of method, because the first thing you need to do at the beginning is separate the hand and the leg. So the hand says stop, the leg says go, and the two don't get applied at the same time. Otherwise you get this kind of squashing, like a toothpaste tube with a lid on it, so the hands are saying no, put my leg on, ask it to go forward, but it can't because my hand is saying no. And then she lightens up a little bit, and it's all a bit hit and miss, so we give him a little tap with the leg there. I think this one freezes up as well. So, yeah, but I don't know whether it's my player or, couldn't get them to go on my phone. Okay, sorry, I think I pressed the wrong button there, Sally Ann, so I'm not quite sure what I managed to record and didn't there. Apologies. But yeah, so she's got her hand saying no and her leg saying go, and quite a big go. I mean, that isn't a lightly negatively reinforced leg. That's a good old pony club slap. So if that doesn't work, and I'm sure that's what he's used to being, how he's used to being ridden. So I think what we need to do is really work on her having some... Sorry, I keep pausing my filming rather than your video. That's it, I've paused the video now. So yeah, I think what we could do is teach Rowan some really, really clear cues. I think that would help. So to teach her some very good negative reinforcement, if you think that would help, I don't mind supporting you through that. I would prefer that you are definitely sure, though, before you started something like that, where you want to go with it. Because remember, you're saying to yourself, I'm not so happy with using negative reinforcement, but then you're telling your 10-year-old, go ahead, you can kick your pony to make it go, because we need you to be able to ride. Yeah, I know, it's an absolute ball breaker and not easy. Okay, this is another of the videos. I think this one played quite nice. It's quite short, so let's have a quick look. So there she's trying to turn him left, nothing. Turn right, nothing. And I'm assuming you're walking backwards a bit as well, so he's following you. So there is absolutely zero response there to turning. So I would really take that absolutely back to stationary. Stand dead still. Do not walk. Do you move your head to the side when I use the rein? You could teach it. If I was going back to doing completely pure positive reinforcement, then I would teach that with either a target or touch my hand. And once I taught him, that's what I did with my last one. I had him from a baby, so you know everything he learnt was through positive reinforcement. I would ask him to target my hand. As he turned around to touch it, I would have a feel on the rein, so that he ultimately learnt that the feel on the rein meant move his head to the inside. Do you have enough time to do this with Rowan? Well, as a project pony, and for you to go forwards and have, you know, he could be around for another 10, 15 years, and you could have some great fun learning positive reinforcement. If he's got a home with you for life and he's not moving on to another child, then, you know, he could be project reinforcement, positive reinforcement pony for both you and Rowan, ready for when she gets something bigger. Okay, I'm going to stop blathering now because I'm aware I've gone on and on and on. So, Sally-Ann, I'm absolutely happy to help you, but I think you have to answer some questions for yourself first. How comfortable do you feel asking Rowan to use reasonably aversive techniques to ask him to move and to stop and turn? Would you like to try and work on some very nice, light, negative reinforcement with her, which might take longer than the year even to do that? Do you want to go back and do better ridden agility, better in-hand agility, and build it up so that he learns to be more autonomous and he can cope with being with her and doing stuff on their own? Because I think there's ways forward with all of it, but I think you've probably now got to commit. Off that fence, girl. Okay, so let me know what you think when you've had a watch of this, if you're not asleep, and we'll go from there.